Well, fellas, we're almost there. The biggest training camp storylines, every NFL team's biggest question that they have to answer for fantasy football purposes. We're going to be breaking it down today. A reminder that I do break down fantasy football news of the day over on the TikTok, on the Instagram, and I'm going to be posting those as shorts. So stay tuned for all of that. That is going to be coming over the next couple of weeks as news comes in fast and furious. You got to keep up. And in our draft guide this year, like we had last year, we are going to have all of that fantasy football news tracked for you by team. And our draft guide is dropping on Tuesday. Of course, flockfantasy.com to get it. Going to go through every NFL team, dive into some of the camp battles that are going to be consequential for us in fantasy football drafts. But before we get into it, reminder that the most important stuff for fantasy football purposes in training camp is injuries, ergo people with pre-existing injuries like a Brandon Ayuk coming into camp, somebody like that, and injuries that happen during training camp. So definitely be on the alert for injured players. Number two, progress for young players, unknown players, and rookies. Think about Jameson Williams last year. What were they doing in Detroit? Beating the drum for this dude. He's going to break out. He's going to break out. He's going to break out. Got to definitely pay attention to that kind of stuff. And then, of course, we also want to track usage for running backs, usage for wide receivers, who's playing in two wide receiver sets, who's the slot receiver, who's the third down back, all that kind of stuff. And, of course, preseason will give us a lot of that stuff as well. So what we're going to do today, let's go division by division, talk about what's most intriguing. You can see some of the underdog ADPs for every team that we go over. I'll spend a little bit more time on the more interesting teams because realistically, there are some teams where we pretty much know what to expect in training camp. Not much is going to change there, at least nothing consequential for fantasy, but I'll try and give you at least one takeaway for every team. For those of you guys that are a fan of the team, I think it is important to talk about some of this stuff. And if you have any insight that you think I'm missing, definitely leave it down below. Let's start with the NFC West. We never start with this division. Let's go to the Los Angeles Rams, which to me is one of the more intriguing teams in the division. I'm going to sort it by what is the most intriguing by team here. We know that Stafford's going to be the quarterback. Puka and Devontae Adams are going to be the number one and number two wide receivers. The most intriguing battle for me in Los Angeles Rams camp is, number one, is Kyren Williams still the guy? Is he still going to lead all running backs with opportunity shares in the 80% range? Because that's what he did last year, and that's what he did in 2023. Or do we start hearing third rounder Blake Corum from last year get some hype? Fourth rounder from this year, Jarquez Hunter, get some hype. Those two guys are battling it out for clearly the number two running back spot, but I am curious how much are they going to impact Kyren Williams' workload overall. And another position battle I'm intrigued with the Los Angeles Rams is tight end, because they drafted in the second round Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, who apparently they were actually going to select in round one. They had him really high on their board by the sounds of it. 4.63 speed, 9.32 RAS score. I know it's hyperbolic, but his actual best comparable in our prospect model was George Kittle. And Sean McVay's got a front row seat for what George Kittle is capable of doing. I'm not going to sit here and say that Terrence Ferguson's going to become George Kittle, but if we hear some positive buzz during training camp, we're already hearing it from Jordan Rodriguez, formerly covering the Los Angeles Rams, now covering the NFL at large for the Athletics. So if we keep hearing the drumbeat for Terrence Ferguson, he needs to be on your radar as one of the best late round tight ends out there. And he is absolutely my highest rostered late round tight end over on Underdog. And while I'm going through this, definitely be jotting down some notes to take advantage in Underdog Best Ball Drafts. Of course, promo code FSE to sign up, get your share of $2 million over in Best Ball Mania 6. If you want to take it down, you're going to have to pay attention. You're going to have to outsharp the sharps here. The San Francisco 49ers staying in this division, there's nothing on the field that I'm actually concerned with here. Everything that could go on in 49ers training camp is either health or contract related. Nothing positional battle that I really am too concerned about, because Christian McCaffrey, the highest ranking 49er off the board in Underdog drafts right now, is he healthy? Is he going to make it through camp healthy? Because even if he's coming in healthy, if he starts getting banged up, he's going to be off my draft board, because that is the thing with the Christian McCaffrey experience. We want to make sure he gets through training camp unscathed, no injuries, not, banged up, no high ankle sprain, nothing like that. We want him on the field healthy and ready to go for week one. So that's training camp storyline number one for the 49ers. Number two, we have guys coming in injured. We have Ricky Pearsall placed on the PUP. Again, not the PUP to start the season where they're out for 4 games. The PUP to start training camp. Physically unable to perform. He is not ready to go yet. Brandon Ayuk, of course, coming off of a multi-ligament ACL tear back in the end of October last year. what is his progress? Is he going to be on the field in training camp at all? Is he going to be completely off the field and we don't hear about him until week 6, week 7 of the regular season? Both of those two receivers for kind of different reasons. Ayuk, because we know he's probably coming in injured and we know he's probably not going to be ready. At least it's a long shot that he's ready for week 1. And then what's the situation with Pearsall? Because the other situation going on here is Juwan Jennings, who wants a new contract. So the top 3 wide receivers for the San Francisco 49ers have some kind of thing going on right now. And all it is pointing to me is that George Kittle is absolutely one of the best picks on the board. Even at pick number 39, I believe, where he goes on Underdog, I am still hammering the button on him, knowing that he actually at one point was being picked around the 50th pick over on Underdog. So definitely an intriguing storyline there for the San Francisco 49ers. Let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Not a whole lot going on here, I would say, because generally Kyler's going to be the QB. James Conner is probably going to be the starting running back, although that is going to be a training camp battle to watch. I don't think Benson's going to put up much of a fight in training camp, but come the regular season, Conner gets banged up. Maybe we hear a lot of hype that Benson looks great. That would be something that I would pay attention to if I was heavily drafting James Conner, which I kind of am starting to. And then also, too, more Marvin Harrison hype train would be nice. We heard about the bulking up. We want to hear Marvin looks like a different player in year 2. The game has slowed down for him. That's the type of stuff we want to hear out of Arizona Cardinals training camp. And then the Seattle Seahawks, I'm not really overly intrigued by anything here because I think it's pretty straightforward. JSN's going to be the number 1, Cooper Kupp going to be the number 2, Sam Darnold going to be the quarterback. I guess the usage of those 2 receivers is important because of the slot stuff for both players. They're both better in the slot. Are we hearing JSN's going to play more on the outside this year? Is Cooper Kupp going to play on the outside? We don't exactly know at that point in time. And I think we know that Kenneth Walker will be the starting running back for this team when healthy, but him getting through training camp without suffering an injury would be crucial. And I guess keep an eye out for any buzz and reports relating to the backfield. If we start hearing, hey, Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet are interchangeable, we're going to use a committee this year, that definitely doesn't bode well for Walker. But I suspect we're going to hear Walker's the guy when he's healthy, Charbonnet's the second back in command. And then maybe keep an eye out for rookie tight end Elijah Arroyo. He can maybe make some noise. As a second-round pick, maybe he's a guy that we want to throw darts at late in best ball drafts as well. Moving into the NFC North, we have the Chicago Bears. I would say of all of the teams in the NFL, the most going on of any of them because legitimately so much has changed from last year. Other than Caleb Williams and DJ Moore and some of the weapons there, everything's changed because of Ben Johnson. There's so many drums that are about to be beaten in Chicago. It's going to be like a friggin' Led Zeppelin concert out here. Rome Odunze, what's his hype look like? He is a very, very intriguing breakout candidate as a former top 10 pick, very highly touted prospect. I want to hear the training camp blow the doors off of the Rome Odunze hype train. For him to be, oh my gosh, look how much of a jump he's made, and he is absolutely a man amongst boys out there. That is the type of stuff I want to hear out of Odunze. Colston Loveland, first off, make sure he's healthy. He's coming into camp healthy according to himself, but he has a chance to legitimately win leagues this year if he's a baller. Because think about it. At the tight end position, what have been the biggest league winners the last 2 seasons? Rookies. Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta the last 2 years, and Colston Loveland as the 10th overall pick in the draft. Higher draft capital even than Brock Bowers, who was the 13th pick in last year's draft. Sam Laporta, a second-round pick in the year before. Definitely want to see Colston Loveland on the field getting some reps because he was a little bit of a raw prospect coming in. And Luther Burden, same thing. If he's healthy, he better start creating some hype clips because this is his time of year. He's fast, he's explosive, he's great after the catch. I want to see my timeline littered with Luther Burden clips. Otherwise, I'll probably stop clicking the draft button on him. Backfield, too. DeAndre Swift, Roshan Johnson, Kyle Menengai, the rookie. Any late additions? Maybe they're going to be going after Travis Etienne or going after some of these other guys that may be on the block or whatever. The open backfield competition, I think, to me, it's not as open as a lot of people probably think it is. I do tend to think it is going to be DeAndre Swift, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I also still think there's a chance that DJ Moore could be on the move. Maybe he gets traded during training camp. We really don't have any idea. There is so much going on in Chicago. There is only one thing that actually matters is that Ben Johnson's a great offensive play caller and coach, and Caleb Williams takes the necessary step that he needs. But realistically, you could say that every single Chicago Bears player has an intriguing storyline heading into training camp. So definitely be on high alert for who's getting the buzz, who's not getting the buzz, and what's going on in Chicago training camp. Definitely one of the most intriguing teams around the NFL for this reason because of all the changes. Green Bay Packers, starting quarterback, starting tight end, and starting running back. We kind of know that, but what else is going on in the Packers weapons core? The biggest battle for sure, to me, given ADP, is Jaden Reed versus Matthew Golden. Who's going to be the go-to guy in the receiving core? Because I do think it'll be one of those two. Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks probably fighting for that third outside wide receiver spot, while Golden is on the outside and Reed is in the slot. So the receiver position, not as intriguing of a storyline quite as much as it was last year for Green Bay, but definitely still an intriguing storyline nonetheless. I tend to think that Jaden Reed will come out on top. He's been the guy that I've been targeting. Battle of RB2, interesting as well. Emmanuel Wilson, who averaged 5 yards per carry last year in his first year getting some real run. And then Marshawn Lloyd, who was a third-round pick in last year's class, who dealt with like a litany of injuries. He had appendicitis, he had ankle sprains, hamstring pulls. Let's keep him healthy for a change, because I do think he can be a really nice handcuff to Josh Jacobs, but if he can't and he can't stay on the field, then that job probably goes to Emmanuel Wilson. The Vikings, I would say the pass catchers are pretty straightforward. We know exactly what we're getting out of Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, now healthy, 2 years removed from the ACL. Let's see. Do we get a Jordan Addison suspension? Sounds like we're going to. Maybe 2, 3, 4 games, something of that nature. Definitely keep an eye on Jordan Addison's ADP, and also when the suspension gets dealt, he's probably going to fall 10, 15 picks of ADP if I had to guess. But similar to Chicago, this is all about the quarterback. How does J.J. McCarthy look? Is he getting the experience? Is he healthy too? Because we need to make sure he is ready to go for the beginning of training camp. He did look great in his only preseason game. He did have that big long touchdown pass in that before tearing his meniscus. Let's see that hype build up. Let's see. J.J. McCarthy looks great. He's commanding the offense. I want to hear that type of stuff before I start to feel very, very confident in the Vikings overperforming expectations and feel very confident taking their weapons highly. Right now, this backfield is also interesting too. Aaron Jones is probably going to start, but Jordan Mason has been getting some buzz as part of this rotation, and specifically in relation to the red zone. Aaron Jones definitely notoriously very good in the red zone. He wasn't last year, but I do think that was more an offensive line concern. So we'll see what happens with the backfield. I tend to think it will be Aaron Jones the starter, Jordan Mason the backup, but maybe we'll hear differently during training camp. Detroit Lions, nothing really too interesting to me, because player by player, we know what to expect. The roles of the running backs, Gibbs, Montgomery, maybe Gibbs takes a bigger step this year. St. Brown, Jameson Williams, we know how they win. Sam Laporta and Jared Goff, we know what to expect from them. Realistically, the only thing you could talk about with Detroit is any changes to the offensive play calling because of Ben Johnson leaving, any changes to the personnel groupings, any changes to play calling tendencies, like how much they're going to throw, for example, because they were a very run-heavy offense under Ben Johnson. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Moving into the NFC East, there are a couple of teams here that definitely are slated to be some of the bigger contenders in the NFC. The Commanders, Terry McLaurin's contract is the biggest story right now. Does he report? Does he not report? We're hearing teammates speak out about it too. Zach Ertz came out and said that they need him there, obviously. When your depth chart looks like, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel as the top two guys, and then behind that, you lose De'Ami Brown in free agency. It is a shallow wide receiver core, and you're going to be relying, if they were to not be out there, on Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler out of the backfield as your primary weapons, in addition to Jaden Daniels' legs. You probably want to get your number one receiver signed. So Terry McLaurin's contract, let's keep an eye on that. Fat Deebo is the other big storyline here. Everybody is talking about how Deebo's out of shape. Deebo hasn't looked like himself last year. But I should remind everyone that we are 2 years removed from Deebo Samuel posting a wide receiver one season in a season with the 49ers in 2023, where George Kittle was a top 6 tight end, Brandon Ayuk was a second-team All-Pro, and Christian McCaffrey was the best running back in fantasy football. So if Deebo Samuel is right, there's plenty of opportunities to touch the football in this offense, because other than Terry McLaurin, who may get out to a slow start if he holds out for a lot of training camp or whatever, Deebo Samuel has a chance to actually be a really nice value at pick number 70 and wide receiver 39, and I've been drafting a ton of him on Underdog. I know people are scared off of the Fat Deebo thing, but Keenan Allen also was a good pick last year, and everybody was scared of him being Fat Keenan. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in Washington, but I do think that Terry McLaurin will probably have his contract situation resolved pretty quickly. The Dallas Cowboys, of course, a lot of attention on them because they're the Dallas Cowboys. Quarterback, wide receivers, tight ends. We know what we're going to expect there. It's going to be Dak, it's going to be Lamb, and then Pickens, and then it's going to be Ferguson. The real storyline here is the backfield, because we don't have any clue who is going to come out of this backfield. Javonte Williams at RB 38 off the board is the highest priced running back in a backfield that projects to be pretty decent in terms of whoever starts could be fantasy relevant. We saw that with Rico Dowdle last year. If you can emerge out of this backfield, you can really be an RB2, even RB1 on some weeks. Jaden Blue, there's been some reports that he might be lazy from some of the Cowboys brass. He's come out and refuted those reports. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. And then my favorite swing in this backfield, actually, Miles Sanders. If you look at the totality of these guys' 3 careers, you got one rookie, not that good of a prospect. Javonte Williams was, intriguing at the beginning of his career, but that multi-ligament ACL tear really set him back and has kind of been a plotter ever since. Miles Sanders, 3 seasons of top 24 fantasy production, his rookie year, his second year, and then that final year with the Philadelphia Eagles before he signed the big contract with Carolina. I know he's been useless the last 2 years, but it wouldn't shock me totally if he ends up being the best running back out of this backfield, even out of training camp. Not even like, as the season goes along, he wins more jobs. No, I think it's possible that Sanders will be the week 1 starter. So I would heavily start drafting him on Underdog right now until his ADP goes up with more positive reports, because it sounds like he's determined. I think he might have the most ability, the most explosiveness, the most 3-down ability specifically because Blue's on the undersized side of things. Definitely intriguing backfield competition battle in Dallas. The Giants' offense, definitely intriguing with the quarterback position. Is Russell Wilson going to start at the beginning of the year? I think that's the expectation because Jackson Dart, a little bit raw, but we did hear a lot of great reports out of OTAs, out of mini camps on Jackson Dart. And if Jackson Dart's going to start at the beginning of the year, I would say this is how you should look at it. If Jackson Dart wins the job out of camp, he might end up being really good because I don't think Russell Wilson's a bum. I don't think Russell Wilson is a type of quarterback that you go, camp bait, camp fodder, the rookie is going to win the job. Like, he is definitely one of the better quarterbacks to bridge the gap between a rookie and a veteran that you could probably have. So I do think Russell Wilson being outright beaten out for the job means that Jackson Dart probably had a really good camp, and maybe the Giants' pieces are undervalued. Tyrone Tracy and Cam Scatterbo, the other big backfield competition battle here, where we need to see what happens, because right now the market has no idea what to do with these guys, and the reason you know that is because they're going pretty much back-to-back at RB 32 and RB 33. Does somebody emerge here? Is it going to be Tracy's backfield at the beginning of the season? That's kind of my expectation, which is why I've been drafting him the most. Or is Scatterbo going to really impress people and he's going to be the early down guy and Tracy maybe just a joker out of the backfield or whatever? So we'll have to wait and see. I tend to think it's going to be Tracy, but that is going to be an interesting running back battle to follow. The Philadelphia Eagles, nothing really interesting going on in Philadelphia, in my opinion, because similar to the Lions, they're a really good offense. We know what Saquon's going to do. We know what Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert are going to do. Are they going to be obscenely run heavy again? Similar to the Lions, tendencies, play calling, things that might shift is pretty much all we can really take away from the Philadelphia Eagles, because my number one thing on my radar is they were so run heavy last year, and obviously Barkley is great and they'll probably be run heavy again. But if they do gear towards a little bit more of the pass, I think that Devontae Smith specifically, but also A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts could be very undervalued and be going under the radar, even despite how high they're being drafted. I think they should go even higher than where they're going. So moving into the NFC South, of course, my home division as a Buccaneers fan, Carolina Panthers, to me, are the most interesting team in this division because we saw that big leap. Week 12 onward, they gave us a run for our money, only a Chuba Hubbard fumble away from beating the Buccaneers in overtime there. Almost beat the Eagles if Xavier Legette catches that pass. Almost beat the Chiefs as well. They were a legit top 12 to 15 scoring unit down the stretch, and Bryce Young averaged over 20 fantasy points per game at the end of the year. Ted McMillan is going to be the big storyline here because he is being drafted the highest. And also, if he goes out there and he's being, drumbeat, he's the number one here, no questions asked, hook, line, and sinker, he probably needs to be going higher than wide receiver 28 in ADP right now. Even if 41 overall on Underdog is high, in home leagues, he'll probably go off the board 50th, 55th, 60th overall, and he could end up being a huge, huge value for those of you guys who are watching this for your home league. So keep an eye on Ted McMillan's buzz. Wide receiver 2 through 4 is probably an open competition as well between first rounder last year, Xavier Legette, who I think they want to win the job. Then you have Adam Thielen, the sturdy veteran, who's maybe break glass in case of emergency. And of course, the undrafted free agent Jalen Coker, who was really, really good last year and definitely better than Xavier Legette. even was, even undrafted to first round pick. So that's going to be an intriguing competition. How does that play out? How does Bryce look? The running back competition behind Chuba Hubbard with Dowdle, Trevor Etienne could be kind of interesting. And also, how does Jatavian Sanders look? Because before his injury, he started to really come on for the Panthers, and he could end up being a really, really solid 15th round dart throw in redraft leagues as an upside swing at tight end, or in best ball specifically, how many spike weeks is this guy going to give you if he is full-fledged the number one tight end there? So he's going to be an interesting one as well. My Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the biggest skeleton key here is Chris Godwin's health, because if Chris Godwin's out there, he's a huge value. If he's out there at the beginning of training camp, no limitations, he is going way, way too low in underdog drafts right now at wide receiver 34 for a guy who only Jamar Chase was better than when he was on the field last year. If he's not healthy, that means Emeka Egbuka is going to be a huge value, and probably Mike Evans as well. So this is going to be an interesting storyline to follow. We did, of course, hear word that Tristan Wirfs is not going to be ready for the start of the season and is probably going to land on PUP for the first 4 games. Maybe he's out even a little bit longer than that by the sounds of it. So the offensive line, left tackle position would also be pretty crucial for Tampa Bay to figure out in the short term while their first team All-Pro left tackle is recovering from off-season surgery. The Atlanta Falcons, role-wise, I don't think we feel all that different about everybody, because we know London's the 1, we know Mooney's the 2, Penix is going to be the starting quarterback, of course, and Bijan Robinson, the number 1 running back, Kyle Pitts, maybe we can actually get something out of you, and then Tyler Algier is going to be the handcuff there. So everything's pretty straightforward in Atlanta. The only real thing to pay attention to is what is the buzz around Penix, because he's the unknown of this offense. If we're hearing and seeing in preseason games and seeing in training camp clips or whatever that he looks like he's going to be a dude, then Bijan might be on his way to a legendary season. Drake London might be a huge value at the 16th overall pick. I already kind of am anticipating that he's going to look pretty solid, or at least be very good for fantasy in a Jameis Winston-y, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins kind of way, where he's going to be putting up points even if he's not the best quarterback in the NFL. And it's also worth noting, too, that if Penix were to struggle or go down with an injury, it's the best backup quarterback in the NFL right now with Kirk Cousins. So I feel pretty confident in drafting both Bijan, Drake London, Mooney, and those type of guys, because I know that even if all hell broke loose and Penix went down with an injury, they have a really good backup quarterback who can steer the ship maybe even better than Michael Penix. So definitely an intriguing storyline for the Falcons. How does the new quarterback look? Quarterback position, also an intriguing storyline in New Orleans, because it's going to be one of Rattler or Tyler Shuck, who was the 2nd round pick this year. Most people tend to think it's going to be Shuck, given the ADP that we have there. And also, what is the health of Chris Olave? What is the health of Rashid Shaheed? Because both of those guys were really good when they were last healthy on the field. And one of my favorite sleepers is Devin Neal at running back. How do him and Kendre Miller and any other running backs there battle it out for RB2 behind Alvin Kamara? Because I do think Kamara's an older guy. Maybe there's a chance that some of these guys get on the field sooner rather than later. And Devin Neal would be my favorite to start getting some buzz and start getting a role at the beginning of the year. Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. We can move on to that division. We got to track Rashee Rice's suspension. That's obviously what we care about the most right now. And the running back battle is also something that's very intriguing in Kansas City, because after last year, where Isaiah Pacheco was a 2-3 turn pick coming off of an RB1 season, gets injured, pretty much misses the whole year, ends up coming back at the end of the year. But if he's healthy, and by all indications he should be, because he played football later that season, being selected 6th, 7th round where he's going could end up being a huge, huge value, because I don't really think that Kareem Hunt, Brashard Smith, Elijah Mitchell, any of the other guys in this backfield are going to put up much of a fight to Isaiah Pacheco. He might just win this job out by default, and I do think a lot of people are assuming he's not very good, but there was a select few of us, myself included, last year, who did think he could take a big leap in his 3rd NFL season going into the year. And in those first 2 games before he went down with injury, he was getting everything. He was getting all the workhorse touches, even the 3rd down, long down, and distance work. So I think people might be surprised by how good Isaiah Pacheco ends up being. He is one of my favorite dead zone running backs this year, because I do think you don't see dead zone running backs who have former RB1 production under their belt, who are still young, who have a Kansas City Chiefs-led offense that has a lot more weapons now and has some improvements up front on the offensive line, that likes running the football, especially in the red zone. So I'm really intrigued by Isaiah Pacheco and how his price changes throughout training camp. Because if we hear it's his backfield, he's going to be our bell cow, he might skyrocket all the way up to like the 4th, 5th round or something like that. So I'm getting my shares while I can. He's already 10 picks higher than he was when I did my first set of BBMs back in June. The Denver Broncos, running back battle is going to be really important. Obviously, RJ Harvey, 2nd round pick. J.K. Dobbins, top 18 running back in fantasy points per game last year. That's going to be a really heavyweight fight, honestly, because you have two guys that one has been a proven producer and really talented when he's gotten opportunities in Dobbins. And then one guy was a 2nd round pick, which is really high draft capital and has gotten some hype as well. So that's going to be a really intriguing battle to follow. The Denver Broncos starting running back is a valuable role. It just depends on who it's going to be. Is it going to be the same guy all season? Is it going to be a committee? We don't exactly know yet. So keep an eye on the Denver Broncos running back battle. I tend to think that J.K. Dobbins will have a little bit of a leg up because he's not a rookie, but we'll have to wait and see. Wide receiver 2 through 4, also an interesting battle for Denver because outside of Cortland Sutton, the current projected slated starter behind him is Marvin Mims, according to the Underdog ADP. But Marvin Mims has never run more than like a 28% route participation in his career. And for whatever reason, Sean Payton hasn't seemed comfortable putting him out there. So is he going to be the number 2 receiver in terms of routes? Is it going to be Pat Bryant, who they drafted in the 3rd round? Is it going to be Troy Franklin, who they drafted in the 4th round last year, who played with Bo Nix in college? Is it going to be Devon Vele, who was probably the best number 2 receiver that they had in terms of how he produced? So the 2 through 5 really in the rotation at wide receiver in camp and in the preseason is going to be something to follow in the Denver Broncos situation. With the Los Angeles Chargers, you got Najee Harris with the eye incident. We'll have to kind of monitor that situation. And of course, coincidentally, Omarion Hampton as well, because he's coming in as a 1st round running back now with no incumbent starter ahead of him. He might really steam his way up the draft board all the way to like the 3rd round of ADP. It would not shock me at all if he's going around the range of like Breece Hall, Bucky Irving by the end of the offseason if we have bad updates about Najee Harris. We also have potential young rookie sleepers as well. Trey Harris, the wide receiver who they drafted in the 2nd round, going off the board at pick 108 on Underdog, but in home leagues, he'll be going off the board way later than that. With Mike Williams' retirement now, which got announced a few days ago, that opens up Trey Harris's role to be the downfield guy opposite of Ladd McConkey, who can do a little bit of everything. Quentin Johnston, who was really good in the red zone and on design touches last year. I do think that could be an interesting thing to follow. And of course, Aronde Gatson, the tight end from Syracuse, who they took in the 5th round. This is kind of a wide open tight end core. You have some veteran guys there like Tyler Conklin who can get the job done, but they've already talked up Gadsden a good amount. And I had him as like a top 4 tight end in the class and thought he was worthy of like a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. So I do think Gadsden has a chance to be one of these waiver wire tight ends that pops up that we're all really excited about. And I'm very excited to see preseason usage with Aronde Gatson, because as a day 3 rookie, if he's getting good usage in the preseason, that is a hugely good sign, because usually day 3 rookie tight end, you have no expectation of them in year 1, and it wouldn't shock me if he's already on the field operating as the team's number 1 tight end as soon as the first game of the season. So Las Vegas Raiders, not much to follow here because I do think we have it pretty cut and dry who we like from a fantasy perspective in this offense. Ashton Genty, let's hear some good receiving stuff. Let's hear some good workload stuff. I think we all expect him to get a big workload, but I would like to hear them say we're going to use him as a great receiver too, because I do think that is the way that he hits his ultimate upside, because the Raiders right now are actually projected for the 6th lowest points according to Vegas win totals. So this is not the type of offense that really would get you excited about drafting a guy in the 1st round unless he's catching a lot of passes also, which he's absolutely capable of doing, but they haven't really mentioned it yet. So I want to hear them say that. The wide receiver rotation behind Jacoby Myers is also going to be something to watch. We heard Dante Thornton get some buzz in mini camps and OTAs. Jack Besh was the guy that they spent the 2nd round pick on. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. AFC North, we have the Cleveland Browns, definitely like the Bears, a lot more intrigue than most other NFL teams, because in addition to a quarterback battle, which is 4 quarterbacks deep when Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, the 2 veterans, Dylan Gabriel, the 3rd round pick out of Oregon, and then, of course, the hype one, Shedeur Sanders, 5th round pick out of Colorado, who comes out on top? Who's getting the reps with the first team? Is it every single day we're going to switch this up? Is it a guy that's a clear leader in the clubhouse once we get into preseason games? We'll have to wait and see there. That is the most intriguing quarterback battle, I would say, around the entire league, maybe outside of the Colts, who I'll talk about in a second. Then we also have the Quinshon Judkins saga, who's not with the team right now, even though the rookies have reported already. He's not with the team because he doesn't have a contract signed, and he also is dealing with this domestic violence situation. And if you guys were employing Quinshon Judkins right now, wouldn't you want to know how that situation is going before you fully guarantee him a contract like every other player picked around him is getting? I would say it's good that they're keeping him away from the team from like a real life team management standpoint, but from Judkins' fantasy value, it's bad because I don't want this to turn into Darius Geist 2.0 because I actually really liked Geist, the player, before he started being a knucklehead off the field as well. But Judkins needs to be in there in training camp because it's a running back battle. You got Dylan Sampson, who they drafted in the 4th round. You got Jerome Ford, who was the incumbent starter last year. If you're not, as the highest draft capital, highest team investment guy in Quinshon Judkins, if you're not there to claim those reps, somebody else will, and it'll probably be Jerome Ford as the incumbent veteran starter. So let's get Judkins settled in. Let's get his contract signed. Let's get his off the field situation figured out and get him into camp because he needs to get those reps right away. Jerry Jeudy, Tillman, Deontay Johnson currently slated as the top 3 wide receivers. My thought process is this. It is very clear by ADP that Jerry Jeudy is the number 1 receiver here. But when Tillman was healthy, they were actually kind of going back and forth. And Deontay Johnson was really good when he was on Carolina last year. And if he's got his head on straight, he's still a talented player too. So I'm curious if Jerry Jeudy is still the clear alpha here, because I think that's what everybody assumes he is, but I'm not sure for 100% that he is the clear alpha, because also David Njoku was very good last year when he was on the field, and we'll have to monitor his situation because they drafted a tight end in the 3rd round by the name of Harold Fannin, and if he gets some hype, that might be bad news for David Njoku. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, all eyes are probably going to be on Aaron Rodgers, I would imagine. But to me, all eyes are on the Steelers' backfield. From a fantasy perspective, I think it's clear Arthur Smith is going to want to run the ball because he has in Tennessee, in Atlanta, in Pittsburgh last year. Anywhere he's been, he likes running the football. It's going to be lots of 12 personnel by the looks of it after trading for Jonnu Smith and already having Pat Freiermuth. There's a good chance that this is going to be a very run-heavy, under-center, play-action type of offense. And who gets those looks? Is it Caleb Johnson, who they spent a 3rd-round pick on, who everybody is drafting currently as the RB1? But it's a pretty small, slender gap between him and Jaylen Warren, who goes off the board as RB31. And then you also have Kenneth Gainwell, who's a 3rd-down specialist who could actually carve out a small role and annoy us all. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in Pittsburgh. I want to hear Caleb Johnson's our dude. Caleb Johnson's the man. Preseason usage dictate it's Caleb Johnson's job before I start drafting him with that high of a pick capital, because 69th overall, that is a high pick, man. We're talking like a 6th round pick, and I don't think he's worth that price tag right now. I'd be comfortable taking him in like the 8th, 9th round, but I don't think you're going to get that, especially if we get drum beats saying he's going to be the guy or he's going to be the top running back. I don't really love this offense in general, but I think people are using the rushing volume to really elevate both running backs up the board, when I think it could be a bit of a headache, both from a managed league perspective and also when the spike weeks come perspective for this Steelers backfield. The Baltimore Ravens, not a whole lot to pay attention to. The only thing I'm really paying attention to is which of the 2 top wide receivers is getting the buzz, because I love me some Zay Flowers. He had a really good year last year, but so did Rashad Bateman. And if him and Rashad Bateman are going to be comparable in terms of target share, in terms of fantasy production, then Bateman could end up being the much better value. So I want to hear 3rd-year breakout type of stuff out of Zay Flowers. He's taken the leap. He looks like a different player. I want to hear that kind of stuff out of him because I like drafting him with the assumption that there's still more there that he can get better at, but I don't want to hear these are our top 2 guys, they look the same kind of stuff. The same is also true for the tight end position in Baltimore as well, because Andrews had the down season last year, even though he caught a lot of touchdowns, but he was like coming off a car accident or something. So if we're hearing Andrews is now healthy, he looks like himself, maybe I'll start drafting him. For now, I've been drafting a little bit of Isaiah Likely because I'm not super sold on Mark Andrews. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, because the only thing I really care about ultimately and honestly is T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. Please make it out of camp healthy. I don't want it. Every year we seem to get a Bengals injury in training camp, and I don't want one this year. I want to see Joe out there healthy and ready to go in week 1. T and Chase out there, no hamstring pulls, no shoulder injuries, nothing like that. You make it through camp healthy, I will be happy with you. And what goes on with Chase Brown? Is Chase Brown the starter and the workhorse out of necessity like he was down the stretch last year? Or are we hearing Taj Brooks is going to be playing a part in this backfield, Zach Moss playing a part in this backfield? Because it's not that I don't think Chase Brown is really good. I do. I don't think Chase Brown, though, is good enough to handle a monster workload with other capable, good running backs in the backfield. Now, is Taj Brooks good? Is Zach Moss good? I'm not exactly sure, but if they're playing well and the coaching staff likes them, I don't think we're going to see Chase Brown of 2024's, weeks 9 onward, where he was like one of the biggest league winners in all of fantasy. I love me some Chase Brown, but I am a little bit skeptical about his like early 3rd round, late 2nd round price tag, when it is possible that they go, oh yeah, Taj Brooks and Zach Moss are going to work into this backfield and make his price go down, and I can draft him in the 5th round or whatever when he's going at that point in time. AFC East, you got the New England Patriots. 2 big things here. Trevion Henderson, who they drafted in the 2nd round out of Ohio State, is going off the board RB23. He has an intriguing skill set, very, very high ceiling because of what he does as a receiver, but Ramondre Stevenson is currently in the way. How much does Stevenson factor in? We know that the previous coaching staff that left, Gerard Mayo and such, didn't really have a huge affinity for Ramondre Stevenson, even though they did give him a decent workload. They tried to bench him multiple times and couldn't because Antonio Gibson wasn't very good. What does it look like this year in training camp with Josh McDaniels coming in, Mike Vrabel coming in? Is this a thunder and lightning, or is Henderson your clear lead back? Because we have seen coaching tendencies of Mike Vrabel to favor bigger backs, but we also know he had Derrick Henry for so long, so you can't really base too much off of that. And then the other one here for the Patriots is Stephon Diggs' health, because Albert Breer reported he should be ready to go for week 1. But I want to see him out there for training camp. I don't want to see him in a brace. I don't want to see him not doing anything, because even though he's a veteran receiver, you got to build that chemistry with your quarterback, because Drake May is not a seasoned, veteran in this league. You need to get the reps in with the young quarterback. As a veteran, Stephon Diggs, you need to be like, hey, this is where I need this ball. Defenders play it like this in the NFL, so on and so forth. You need that time to get those reps in. And if you're not out there in training camp, I'm probably not as excited about drafting you. And I would probably lean towards maybe more Kyle Williams types or whatever at cost. So the Buffalo Bills, the biggest storyline that they have right now is James Cook's holdout. Does that end? Does that continue? We don't know. We won't know that until Tuesday when veterans are reporting to training camp. If James Cook is not there, then we're going to know that he is serious about holding out. And that obviously is going to increase the price of Ray Davis, decrease the price of James Cook. And to me, I'll be taking the value on James Cook's price tag at that point in time. But we'll also have to wait and see what happens, because if James Cook gets a contract extension, that will really increase his price from a dynasty perspective too. And then the other thing I want to know in Buffalo is who's getting the number 1 buzz? Because we know last year Khalil Shakir was their number 1, but their number 1 resulted in 800 yards and 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns. And we all know that Josh Allen had a down passing season and is capable of more. So if that regresses positively, they throw the ball a little bit more, Allen has a little bit more passing production. Is it Keon Coleman, who's the 2nd-year wide receiver, didn't show a whole lot as a rookie? Is it Dalton Kincaid, who has been definitely not that good, I would say, going through his first 2 seasons, but he's also had splits where he's been good. He's been dealing with injuries and that kind of thing, but that was a problem for him in college. What does Dalton Kincaid look like in this tight end rotation? Or is it going to be Khalil Shakir again? And maybe he ups his production to 900 yards, 6 touchdowns this year. Overall, I want to see what happens in this wide receiver core and tight end core, and even Elijah Moore. He could get some buzz in training camp because I do think he's a talented player still. Speaking of Elijah Moore, let's get to the New York Jets. There's no team, I feel like, that has more consolidated fantasy point production than the New York Jets, where all of the fantasy points come from Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Justin Fields, because there's no good wide receivers. Not one is being drafted with a draftable ADP right now. So whoever you think the number 2 is, whether it's Lazard or Reynolds or Malachi Corley or whatever, nobody seems to know. So maybe we get some clarity on that. I would say the running back rotation is probably the biggest piece of info, because right now I have Breece Hall ranked rather aggressively. He goes 35 on Underdog. I have him ranked at 25, so I'm a little bit higher than market on him. But if I start hearing Braylon's going to be the short yardage back, and Isaiah Davis is going to spell him on 3rd downs, and we legit see 3 starting running backs here and stuff, I might have to knock him down a little bit. But I tend to think it's going to be Breece Hall revenge season, and he is going to be back to his workload of old, because as much as Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen are solid, they're not as good as Breece Hall. So we'll have to wait and see if that was all talk, because they have hyped up the other backs in the past, over the past couple of months, or if when push comes to shove, preseason games and all that kind of stuff, it's Breece Hall's show and he is the only show in town. Dolphins, similar to the Bengals, I know what to expect out of Tyreek, Waddle, and Tua. Just stay healthy. Don't get any injuries, specifically Tyreek and Tua, who are old/injury prone in general. And keep an eye on this backfield too, because I do think Devon Achane is going to be very clearly the starting running back here. But keep an eye out who RB2 is, whether it's Jalen Wright, who they drafted in the 3rd round or the 4th round last year, but also traded up a 3rd round pick from 2025 to go get him in last year's draft. Or is it going to be Ollie Gordon, who they drafted in the 5th round? So we'll have to wait and see who RB2 is in this situation. Also keep an eye on Darren Waller, who they recently signed after trading away Jonnu Smith. Moving into the AFC South, the final division of this video. 2 really, really intriguing storylines right off the top. AFC South, I would say number 1 most intriguing training camp stuff is the Jacksonville Jaguars for a couple of reasons. But first and foremost, because the number 2 pick in the draft, who could play offense and could play defense, plays for their team. What does Travis Hunter's usage look like in training camp? What's the coach speak like? And I tend to think that no player in fantasy football drafts is affected more this entire offseason than what his coaches are saying about him than Travis Hunter. Because if the Jaguars coaching staff came out right now and said that Travis Hunter is going to be a full-time wide receiver and play very sparingly on defense, his ADP would go up 2.5 rounds. If the Jaguars came out and said he's going to play primarily defense because we don't really like what we have at corner or something like that, his ADP would drop 3.5 rounds. So he is going to go up and down everywhere and in circles based on what they say about him and what we see in usage and stuff in preseason. So keep an eye on Travis Hunter and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And to top it all off, they also might have the most intriguing running back battle of any team in the NFL, because we know Liam Cohen architected one of the most creative, the most efficient, and the most effective running back 1-2 punches last year with Bucky Irving, the rookie, and Rachaad White in Tampa Bay. He also had a really good offensive line get even better last year in Tampa Bay. They were already really good going into the year, but then when he got there, everybody's playing at a better level than they were before. So right now, the market seems to think it's going to be Travis Etienne as the starting running back, at least at the beginning of the season, in preseason games, and so on and so forth. But what is the report and what is the buzz on Byshell Tootin, the 4th round pick who they drafted, who apparently James Gladstone pitched Shad Khan during his interview? We have to get this guy. He will change our offense. So that's encouraging to know that the GM wanted him that bad. And then also, what does Tank Bigsby look like in this backfield? Because he was the best of him and ETN on a per-touch basis last year. So lots going on with Jacksonville. Make sure to plug into some Jacksonville Jaguars beat reporters over on X if you guys need to follow situations there. Indianapolis Colts are no exception. There's a whole lot going on here too. The best quarterback battle, I would say, for my money in the offseason this year. Richardson is now healthy. He's throwing. Daniel Jones, probably the break glass in case of emergency option by conventional wisdom. But does Richardson elevate at just 24 years old? He's still a very young player. Does he elevate his play and fend off Daniel Jones? When your back's against the wall, can you elevate your play? That is going to be what people are looking at for Anthony Richardson. Or does Daniel Jones, who never had a good offensive line, really didn't have that good of weapons, like his best season in New York came with Darius Slayton and Richie James as his number 1 and number 2 receiver. He has never had a situation like this. He's never had a line like this, coaching staff like this, weapons core like this, 4 deep at wide receiver, and a rookie tight end who you take in the top 15, plus a former all-pro running back to run the football. Also, major storyline to me in Indianapolis too is like, what is the pecking order here? Like, what does it look like? The ADP and conventional wisdom would say that Downs and Pittman are the clear 1 and 2 at wide receiver. Tyler Warren is going to be heavily involved as the number 2 target, maybe the number 3 target, something of that nature. But what does the number 3 wide receiver position look like? Is it Alec Pierce, who had a great season last year, or is it Adonai Mitchell, who they spent a top 45 NFL draft pick on? So this is going to be a really weird situation to follow, but I do think we should get some answers about Indianapolis Colts training camp and what is the pecking order, what does the quarterback position look like? Because right now there's so much uncertainty that if I were you guys and you wanted to get some exposure because you feel like something's going to go a certain way, like I do, for example, I think that Daniel Jones will win this job. Go get some exposure, because if Daniel Jones is announced the starter, his ADP is going to be 145 instead of 203 like it is. If Anthony Richardson gets announced the starter, his ADP is going to be 125 because of how much he runs the football. So keep that in mind. If you got a significant lean on this situation, the weapons, the quarterbacks, whatever, you should probably go take advantage of it. And I tend to think that Tyler Warren's going up in ADP, Josh Downs is going up in ADP, and Daniel Jones is going up in ADP, which is who I've been heavily targeting from this situation. The Tennessee Titans, Running back battle is definitely going to be close. I think other than Pittsburgh, probably in the AFC, this is the closest RB1 and RB2 ADP that you're going to find, where the RB1's going off the board, RB28 in Tony Pollard, RB2's going off the board, RB40 in Tajay Spears. Last year, on a top 10 opportunity share in 13 games as a clear-cut starter, Tony Pollard posted 2 top 12 scoring weeks with that big of a workload. I get the Titans were bad. They had the first overall pick. But in 3 games with a top workload as the lead back, Tajay Spears was a top 12 running back all 3 times on the week. So to me, he's the better back. He's the guy that I've been targeting very, very heavily in my drafts. And I do think that if we get into training camp and we start to hear some flip-flop messaging like, hey, it's going to be Spears or it's going to be a committee or whatever, we might see these ADPs get even closer than they currently are. Or hell, maybe Tajay Spears outright flips them based on preseason usage or something to that effect. The Houston Texans, the very final team that we're going to talk about here, the wide receiver 2 to 4 race is going to likely be Christian Kirk in the slot. Of course, Nico Collins, the number 1, and then Jaden Higgins, the second-round pick on the outside. Jalen Knoll, who also went to Iowa State with Jaden Higgins, who was the third-round pick, is also probably going to factor in somewhere. So what does the wide receiver 2 through 4 race look like? Are the rookies beating out Christian Kirk, or is Christian Kirk holding them off? The running back rotation also has my attention too, because Joe Mixon was kind of dealing with injury throughout minicamp and OTAs, and then they add Nick Chubb in free agency after the compensatory pick formula time went away. And then they also drafted Woody Marks in the 4th round, who could take away receiving work. And as I talked about in yesterday's video or Friday's video, Joe Mixon really fell off from like an efficiency standpoint down the stretch last year. So I am not drafting him at all at pick 58 on Underdog. And instead, I would rather play this backfield through the cheaper options, Nick Chubb, Woody Marks. Generally, I'm kind of lower on this team all across the board. Like, I'm not drafting a whole lot of Nico Collins, maybe a little bit of Jaden Higgins and Christian Kirk here and there because of their price tags, but I'm not overly excited about the Texans this year. But that was all 32 teams, their biggest camp storylines for fantasy football. Let me know what you guys are following. To me, if I had to rank the top 5 camp storylines across the league, I would say the Colts QB battle is probably near the top because it'll affect so much with their weapons core. The Travis Hunter saga's got to be near the top as well. The Cleveland Browns, just in general, their quarterback play, their Quinshon Judkins situation, that is an intriguing storyline. All of what's going on in San Francisco is very intriguing too. And then I would say generally there's a lot going on in Carolina with the Dallas backfield. There's a couple of other really good honorable mentions. And of course, the Chicago Bears, like I said, everything's new there. So there's going to be a lot to talk about across the board. So let me know what you guys think are the best training camp battles. If you guys want all the best fantasy football news broken down, short form content, easy to digest, easy to follow, I will have you covered over on our TikTok. Head on over there, tiktok.com/fantasy stock exchange. Check us out on Instagram. Me and Danny both have TikToks going, and we're going to basically aggregate those into the Instagram account. So definitely check that out too. And of course, stay tuned right here. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll have you covered with biggest risers and fallers from training camp, biggest risers and fallers after preseason games, and all that good stuff. So you're going to want to make sure to keep it tapped right here. And again, fantasy news that happens throughout training camp will be aggregated into our draft guide on the fantasy news tab in the redraft rankings manifesto 4.0. And you can get your version of it on Tuesday, July 22nd, when training camps open up. That will be the first edition going live. You can head on over to flockfantasy.com, use the promo code FSE to get started and get access to our draft guide over there. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.